morning. It is Thursday, April 30th, 2015. This is your morning edition on I-24 News. Coming up later today, Baltimore protests resume ahead of the 10 p.m. curfew in the city. Israel's justice system is racing for battle, with the incoming government expected to wage war on the Supreme Court's authorities. And later on the show, we examine the origins of ISIS with investigative journalist Itai Engel, who was in Iraq in what he says was the time of their formation. Good morning, I'm Yael Avi, and we begin straight in the United States today. Protests resumed in Baltimore yesterday evening with hundreds of people marching to City Hall ahead of the city's 10 p.m. curfew, put in place after violence flared Monday following the funeral of a black man who died in police custody earlier this month. Simultaneous demonstrations, also involving hundreds of people, sprang up in New York City's Union Square and in Boston outside the police department headquarters. Now in Baltimore, though, some calm was felt yesterday when throughout the day cleaning efforts were carried out in the city. Religious leaders and community activists have said they hope to turn a tide back to peaceful protest and initiate broader dialogue about how to address problems plaguing Baltimore's African-American communities. For now, though, the calm is maintained with the force of curfew and 3,000 National Guards. That said, any turning point may be another turning point, may be the result of the investigation into the cause of death of Freddie Gray. Until then, it is safe to assume forces will stay on the ground in Baltimore. Now, to further discuss this, we're joined in studio by I-24 News contributor Jacob Wirtschafter. Jake, good morning to you.
Good morning, Yael.
With me in studio also Ami Kaufman, I-24 News Morning Edition member. Good morning.
Good morning, Yael.
And before we break it down, let's take a look at the following report that recaps yesterday's relative calm and take it from there.
The streets of Baltimore were largely quiet on Tuesday night after police enforced a curfew following 2 intense days of heavy riots. 10 people were arrested overnight, despite the curfew that went into effect at 10 p.m. local time. Earlier, police had used rubber bullets and lobbed tear gas to dissolve the protest. I-24 News obtained footage of Mayor Stephanie Rawlings Black as she tried to calm the angry protesters.
No, I don't believe that the justice system has failed. I believe that everyone should allow it to take its course. There's a process to everything.
The latest violence erupted after the death of African-American Freddie Gray from a severe spinal injury while in custody on April 19, a week after he was arrested. It is also the latest in a series of similar events which sparked outrage in the entire country, as protesters accuse the authorities of having a light trigger finger when it comes to minorities. President Barack Obama said Tuesday there is no excuse for the violence, but also voiced concern over police treatment of African Americans.
We have seen too many instances of what appears to be police officers interacting with individuals, primarily African American, often poor, in ways that raise troubling questions.
In Chicago, hundreds of demonstrators marched Tuesday night to protest police brutality, but the mystery surrounding the circumstances of death of 25-year-old Gray remains unsolved, and questions over the reasons of his arrest or at what point his injury occurred remain open. Baltimore police claim there was no use of force during Gray's arrest. However, a video released a week ago shows police officers dragging Gray while he was apparently screaming in pain.
Let's go straight now to Baltimore, where we're joined by JCC community rabbi Jesse Broth. Jesse, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us. I should be calling you Rabbi. Thank you for joining us. I want to hear from you. What is going on right now in Baltimore? Calm maintained, I'm assuming, by the curfew?
Yeah, well, for the most part, I think that the streets of Baltimore are quiet, and more so tonight than maybe last night, and definitely more so than the night before.
Now, when it comes to Baltimore itself, and we're looking in the last several days, just run us through what can be done in the coming days, and is this going to have any type of dent when it comes to the racial divides and clearly the animosities that the African-American community is feeling towards the police forces right now?
Sure. Well, those are good questions, and thanks for asking the latter. In response to your first question, the truth of the matter is there's a few different things that are happening here in Baltimore all simultaneously. we see a tremendous outpouring of generosity on part of many of the residents downtown, those from within the communities in which the action's been taking place, and also those that resonate to the issues that are coming up, that are inhabitants of the city, that see some of the challenges firsthand and want to do their part in helping to make sure people get fed who are in need of food in those areas, helping with cleanup efforts, really working with the organizers and the community leaders on the ground to support their efforts as they try to begin to heal from the past few days. And that, of course, gives way to the larger issues that are kind of in the hands of the residents and the people who love Baltimore to have to work with as the days and weeks unfold. The city of Baltimore has organized a countywide Google document. There's pretty up-to-date information in terms of volunteer needs, both specifically what needs there are on the ground and also locations for volunteers wanting to show up. I spent most of the day yesterday in West Baltimore, and there was tremendous presence of volunteers. And simultaneously, there's also daily marches scheduled. It was thousands tonight, not hundreds of people who marched through the city, and there are multiple marches planned as the days continue to make sure that, in light of the activity that we're seeing broadcasted around the world, that the issues that they're kind of bringing up remain at the forefront of what we're trying to do here.
And fascinating. And Rabbi, I would love for you to stay with us just for this part. Jake Wertschafter, I-24 News contributor, with us in studio, because I think the next phase, and it's wonderful, I don't want to say, wonderful may be too harsh of a word. It's good to see that there have been efforts of cleanup, there have been marches, that there's an attempt to restore calm. But, I mean, first of all, let's talk about the fact that the investigation is still underway. And there might be a turning point when that report comes out about what exactly happened to Freddie Gray, right? We're looking at that. I mean, where does the investigation stand right now?
Well, I'm sure the rabbi knows more about on the ground in Baltimore what the rule is in terms of investigating peace officers in Maryland.
Right.
I believe that there's a very strong legislation protecting police and giving them this 10-day cooling off period before they can actually be questioned about questionable incidents. And we've got 6 police officers here involved in the Freddie Gray incident. I would quickly turn the corner, though, and say one of the interesting things for me is that we now have a rabbi in this conversation. And there seems to be this engagement of faith leaders and community organizers from different parts of society in urban America's problems. And I can tell you, not to brag about my own family, but last night my own sister was at a Methodist church in South Los Angeles, which isn't all that different from West Baltimore. And the issues were housing, returning of offenders to the community, and jobs. And ultimately, it's housing, it's jobs, it's return of offenders, and education that are going to turn this situation around.
And Rabbi Gross, you're still with us. That fascinating to hear that as we're sitting here in the Middle East. But when it comes to I'm wondering out loud with you that it takes the religious leaders. And first of all, I'm wondering if you're agreeing with Jake here in the studio. But it takes the religious leaders. Doesn't it take the religious leaders to step in and do something that actually the government hasn't been doing over the course of the last several years?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's an interesting thing. I think that first and foremost, there's tremendous leadership on the ground, both in terms of faith leaders and organizers, and the attention and the networking of how to support these efforts so that the story doesn't remain about the events that are unfolding, but actually makes way into the issues that these events have given light to is I think, a stronger network of leadership and organizers than I've ever witnessed before. I mean, I woke up to phone calls from the head leadership of the Religious Action Center down in Baltimore because of the way that I'm affiliated through my rabbinic network. And I stood alongside the clergy of Baltimore throughout the day yesterday. And I mean, you can watch the videos. You would see that in between the police lines and the civilian lines were clergy, men and women across all faiths, walking hand in hand, trying to bring music and trying to bring the wisdom of our tradition's teachings into kind of the soul of the issues that are coming up as we're dealing with these situations on the ground here in Baltimore, but really in so many cities throughout America as a result.
And exactly that, I just want to still touch on that because that's everything in the studio in many ways. We see it takes the religious clergy, religious leaders to try and impose calm to help the communities because there's some loss of faith in the government. And what does this show us about, I'm sorry, the administration in the United States under the leadership of an African-American president, and years before that too, that cannot take a hold, that it takes an army to stop this?
Well, a couple things. In terms of nonviolence and religious leaders and sort of pegging this to the African-American community, look, the biggest riots were 40X years ago, right? After Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated. Right. Okay, so the violence breaks out, after the leader of the nonviolent movement is assassinated by a white racist. So let's just get out there in terms of like where the anger comes from. A young black man has a 21% more chance of getting killed by a policeman than a white person. In terms of trying to dissect Obama's leadership on race and class, look, guys, he inherited a real mess. He had to bail out Wall Street, and the reality is Main Street was hurting so badly, and then he found out how bad Wall Street went, and they needed the cash in order to keep the global economy going. So Obama just has not to mention the fact that there isn't congressional leadership right now that would support investment in urban America, and the president related to that in his speech 2 days ago.
No, very, 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 very true. And Rabbi Gross, just to ask, just really quickly, what is expected today?
Today we're expected to continue the efforts on the ground. Most of the efforts are still trying to get the needed resources that range from general supplies and food into the communities. Most of that distribution is happening through a network of about 15 churches and places of worship in the area. And as the day goes on, around the afternoon time, there are a series of marches and protests staged throughout the city, as they will be for every day for the rest of the week. And then as night starts to fall, it feels like the world's watching, waiting for something to happen. But I'm optimistic that we're going to see quieter nights, and hopefully when all is said and done, get to the topics we should really be talking about, that these events have, brought to the surface. Highlighted.
Rabbi Gross from Baltimore joining us. Thank you for being with us this morning as we move along.
Thank you.
Nepal clearly still in the news, still suffering. Aid has begun to reach remote regions near the epicenter of Saturday's devastating earthquake in the country. As relief efforts continue in the Kathmandu Valley, the UN says the response is broadening to include hard-hit areas such as Deding and Gorkha. Now, the 7.8 magnitude quake killed more than 5,000 people, reaching almost 6,000, I think, this morning. Many survivors are in desperate need of food and water. The numbers of the casualties, the dead, are expected to rise. Let's first watch a report on the latest developments from Nepal and break it down from there.
5 days after the devastating earthquake which shook the nation of Nepal to its very core, the news this morning wasn't much better. With the death toll continuing to climb, scenes of destruction are common throughout the city. Here at Durbar Square, where several temples dating as far back as the 16th century collapsed into rubble last Saturday, foreign search and rescue teams have arrived to help in the effort.
The rescue company continuing since yesterday. So many armies and police they are trying to avoid all the damaged materials and looking for the alive person.
As you can see, the army and police have cordoned off this part of the Jaffa temple complex to allow this Japanese search and rescue team to get to work. They're still busy looking for survivors, clearing rubble, and hoping to find people alive. Not far away is Tudikal Park. This large stretch of grass in the city center has now been transformed into a tent city, with thousands of people now living as refugees in their hometown. Many of them simply refuse to return to their homes for fear of further aftershocks, even this long after the original quake. Others have no choice, their houses destroyed. Basic supplies and sanitation are lacking here, with cases of disease already noted. While the government and armed forces have been providing aid, it has not been enough.
It's been like 4 days now. Toilet is also not available, you know. Sometimes the army, they make it clean, so everybody make dirty, you know.
How long do you think you will be here?
We are not sure. Maybe we're asking for the rescue team, you know, different people, how many days we have to stay here, you know. But our houses is gone. That's why no one say it's not sure, you know, how long you have to stay here. We are not sure.
Not all of the homeless are based here, though. Others prefer to sleep on the side of the road. Smoke and ash fill much of the air in the disaster-struck city. The source is these funeral pyres, where the dead are cremated in compliance with the tenets of the Hindu faith. This man has come to the Pashupatinath temple on the banks of the Bagmati River to pay his last respects to his grandmother.
Actually, this is a religious place, and people come here to worship God. Here are a lot of God, maybe more than 100 gods here. And this place is a burning place. So when the people are dead, actually, especially Hindu people who is related to Hindu culture, they bring them here and they burn here.
The funeral pyres here behind me will burn well into the night. They will be replaced by others in the morning. And in fact, the fires here will continue to burn for their foreseeable future as the death toll climbs well into the thousands. In times of crisis, people here, as in other corners of the globe, take comfort in their faiths and traditions. 3 days of national mourning have been declared, but for tens of thousands, life will never be the same.
We go now straight to Shai Ben-Ari, I-24 News reporter covering the events in Kathmandu on the ground. Shai, good morning to you. Very strong, very important report there. And I want to ask you this morning, it's so hard to even gauge how long it will take just this first phase of pulling bodies out of the rubble. Where do things stand this morning? And the feelings of the Nepalese, usually a calm people, there are voices already against the government. We're hearing, correct me if I am wrong.
Yeah, I have to say, I've been really impressed, me and Mael, the French reporter who we're both here, we've really been impressed with the reaction of the Nepalese people. They sort of take this kind of crisis in stride. Not a lot of emotional outbursts. It's hard to judge that kind of reaction, but it's certainly very impressive. They don't seem to be very effectively sweet on the outside. It's interesting to see that kind of reaction. They sort of go on with their daily lives. Indeed, here in Kathmandu, things are very slowly and gradually getting back to normal. Shops are open and this kind of thing. It's slowly dawning on everybody that the real damage, the major damage that we're talking about here is in the rural areas surrounding Kathmandu, mainly the mountainous areas, to the point where the extent of the damage is not exactly clear, because most of these areas are very remote indeed. Communications are still bad when it comes to these areas. It's not clear exactly how many people are dead, how many people how many bodies need to be extracted. We know of around 250 people whose lives are fearful just in the Langtang area. That's a popular hiking destination. But we're not talking about any clear idea about how many villagers, Nepalese citizens in these areas are affected at this moment.
No, entirely. And when it comes to the rural areas, because in situations as such, and we understand also the weather is a problem, but not only that, is aid managing to even get out there? You know, when it stands on the efforts of getting to those rural areas, the far and gone between, so to speak, is aid, rescue teams. What are the hardships that those teams are facing to get out past Kathmandu?
Well, certainly there are plenty of search and rescue missions still being undertaken by the various foreign teams as well as the Nepalese Army. The Israelis are very active in this sense, as well as teams from Japan, the USA, France. We have seen them in action. Yesterday, we had a chance to visit the IDF field hospital, and just while we were there were about 3 different helicopters landing there to evacuate patients to the field hospital. We saw that in action, and we'll be bringing further updates on that. Indeed, it's very difficult to reach these areas, but the effort is continuing. The search missions are ongoing, and we hope to actually join one of those in the next coming days. Basically, the situation is it still remains unclear just how long this will go on. We know that the UN is preparing a 3-month mission. As far as how long the actual search teams, the foreign search teams, will be here, that remains unclear. I think people are expecting a number of weeks, say a month, but it could be extended beyond that, because we are talking about a very special sort of crisis with very remote areas, and indeed these search teams are a critical part of the effort.
Shaiban Ali, thank you very much for this report. Do keep safe, and we'll hear from you in the coming days. Thank you. And to here in the studio, I just want to ask one thing, or maybe raise a question that it's not even a question. The thing that always scares me about situations as such is that we're seeing this. The pictures are very, very strong. That's what we do in television. It's pictures that you can't not but show. What happens? Because this is devastation. This is not war. This is devastation on a biblical scale. What happens when the media leaves? Does money really keep flowing in? You know, Jake, you and I have covered many horrific stories, but people pledge so much money now towards Nepal.
The pledges are huge, and of course collecting them, as we've noticed in Gaza, is a different story, not to mention Syria.
And actually Haiti as well, I think. I think that's exactly what happened in Haiti.
Exactly. You know, there's been appropriate attention given to the idea of field hospitals and the role that they play immediately after the earthquake. Less attention has been given, though, to a group called IsraAid here, which actually specializes in the aftermath of the post-trauma situation. And one of the things that IsraAid is known for is sticking with the community after the trauma. They're still in Japan years after the earthquake there. They're still in Haiti years after the earthquake there. The broken families, broken homes, broken economic systems
everything
continue. And so this long-term commitment is as in being there. I think, you know, it's the money and it's also the people. Their commitment to stay on the ground, I think, matters in terms of long-term recovery.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, we hear a lot about the pledges. We hear a lot about the field hospitals, and a lot about quake diplomacy when quakes happen. But those things usually last just for a few weeks. And later, you know, the countries are left.
Because this is damage that is not going to take 3 months, as Shaiban and I mentioned. It's great that the UN is pledging 3 months of assistance. But this is years. This is 5 years at least, just to get back to some form of infrastructure in a country that barely had any. Which may be the perfect time to move on to press, to hear more about horrific news around the world. But yes, let's Ami Kaufman with the news that we need to hear.
We're going to go back to what we talked about earlier, to items that are relevant to Baltimore. Yesterday we showed a video that went viral of a mother. Well, we didn't know if it was a mother. It was a woman who was apparently dragging her son out of the riots. And she has been identified yesterday. Her name is Toya Graham. Her son was 16 years old, Michael. And
she probably saw him on TV.
She saw him on TV. She ran down to the area and dragged him out and kind of slapped him around a little. And the video.
That's the kind of mother I want to be.
The video went viral. She was she was coined the greatest mother in America or something.
Yes.
And the Baltimore police chief wanted all parents to act just like her.
And I'm sorry, I have to say this because the line that you hear her saying on that video that we saw yesterday, which is, "Are you kidding me?
Exactly.
Really? Yeah. Smash."
She said yesterday to media, "I'm a no-tolerant mother. Everybody that knows me know I don't play that." And she said that she was shocked and angry to see her son there, and she didn't know about that she was a social media hero until she started seeing comments on her Facebook.
She had no money for a computer, most
on her
likely.
Facebook page.
Okay. I mean, one of the underlining issues of the poor communities, the African American communities. She saw her picture on Facebook.
And there, by the way, there is a now Facebook page, Toya Graham for mayor.
No, but speaking of the mayor, I know this Jake is making of the face. That's the worst job in America right now, isn't it?
On to Hillary Clinton, who is, of course, running for president and had one of her first huge policy speeches yesterday in an event in New York, an event actually that was held for David Dinkins, a former mayor, first African-American mayor of New York City. She wants to have a radical overhaul of the U.S. Criminal justice system and end mass incarceration.
Reversing the Bill Clinton legacy.
It is reversing the bill. Well, first of all, the numbers are amazing. In 1980, there were about 500,000 people that were incarcerated in the States, and now that has jumped to 2.3 million people. This is accounting for, first of all, 5% of the American population and 25% of all incarcerated people around the world. A quarter of people in prisons around the world are in America.
We're also beginning to see, I mean, I hate to take it away from the crisis in America over criminal justice, but we're also seeing how the Clintons now are playing as a political team. I mean, Bill was out there already yesterday saying, I made some mistakes on criminal justice legislation and comments made to the press. And so, you know.
And my wife is going to fix it.
It's so interesting. It's triangulation yet again. They are certainly pros.
They are. They're really professionals. Of course, you're talking about the law that he enacted in 1994, which put billions in making more prisons, putting about another 100,000 cops on the streets, which most people are saying this brought the fastest rise of incarceration for African Americans. So he is responsible for that, and he admitted this mistake, as you said.
Yeah, but
and he was the first black president.
Yeah,
Obama wanted to be the first Jewish president.
Okay. Yeah. Moving along.
Moving along back to our area, the Middle East. Saudi Arabia has the leader of Saudi Arabia, the new king, King Salman, made a huge reshuffle in his cabinet and appointed his nephew, who is the powerful Interior Minister, Prince Mohammed bin Nayef. He is the new crown prince, the successor, and his own son, Mohammed bin Salman, as the deputy crown prince, the second in line.
And so I want that chair.
It does look like a nice chair. It does look like a nice chair.
And I want the chair. No, fascinating.
Yeah, he's pushing aside the allies of the former king.
And very quickly.
Very quickly.
Yeah.
His son, by the way, is only 30 years old. He's the defense minister now. He is the one who is running the campaign in Yemen. So he's got a lot on his shoulders already. And apparently, this the crown prince Mohammed bin Nayef is very close to the states, and America's will probably welcome this reshuffling in Saudi Arabia.
One would assume, I think, also, in the eyes of what's coming up in June, what does that spell for that? But time will tell. June, I'm talking about the Iranian agreement. Yes.
Right. The Times of Israel comes with this headline. British Prime Minister Cameron, ahead of the elections just over a week far away, standing by Israel and its right to defend itself in an interview to the Jewish Chronicle, pretty much towing a line that we hear a lot from Benjamin Netanyahu.
Right.
Says about the Israeli attacks in Gaza last summer, we regret the loss of life wherever it takes place, but I do think there's an important difference, as Prime Minister Netanyahu put it. Israel uses its weapons to defend its people, and Hamas uses its people to defend its weapons. So this is a real, classic.
No, that's I'm sorry, that's a classic running line in many. Yeah.
And of course, he's saying this to
not the line that we heard though.
The Jewish Chronicle.
The Jewish Chronicle, obviously, but not the line that we heard throughout the summer from the British administration.
No, they actually had a large, they're critical of
the
numbers, the high numbers of the people that are dying
Palestinian casualties that were suffered throughout that war.
But things change when elections
are looming. Shocking. Yes.
In Nigeria, some good news, although some 300 girls were rescued from Boko Haram. These are not...
I know, it's not the girls from a year ago.
The Chibok girls of 200, but what's interesting is that these girls, when they were saved by the Nigerian forces, they opened fire on their rescuers because they were been so indoctrinated.
Now that's a frightening thing. It's the frightening thing, I think, that begs for what we call the Stockholm syndrome of sitting with you. Sadly, all the time we have when we get back, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu works to complete his government. The judicial branch enters defensive mode, anticipating the battles ahead. First, the news. Stay with us. Welcome back. I-24 News Morning Edition on this April, on this April 30th, 2015. Yes, it is 2015. I do not know the year it is, but I do know the next story. In the never-ending tug of war between the branches of government, Israel's judiciary currently finds itself on the back foot. Now, having secured control of the legislative and executive branches in the recent elections, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's Likud party has set its sights on the country's justice system, looking to curb the authorities of the Supreme Court. Though held in high esteem around the world, many on the Israeli right see the High Court of Justice in Israel as a bastion of the left, promoting its ideals over those that the Israeli public chose to vote into office, especially when it comes to matters of civil rights. Speaking at a conference in Jerusalem yesterday, Supreme Court President Miriam Naor gave voice to her fears, saying that the court is the last barrier against harm to human dignity and other fundamental rights, and noting that it is hard to build and easily to destroy. So, to further discuss this, we are joined in studio by I-24 News diplomatic correspondent Tal Shalev. Tal, good morning to you.
Good morning, yeah.
Also very glad to be joined by Jerusalem Post legal affairs reporter Yona Bob. Yona, good morning to you.
Glad to be here.
Before we break it down, let's take a look at Tal Shalev's report and then discuss.
Israel's new governing coalition is still in the making, but the Prime Minister has already marked one clear target: the Israeli Supreme Court. In the past weeks of negotiations with future members of his narrow right-wing government, Netanyahu has proposed dramatic changes to the High Court's status, critically limiting its power. Israel's judicial system, led by the Supreme Court, is highly appreciated worldwide for its professionalism and independence, and is considered one of the country's greatest democratic achievements. However, various court decisions to strike down parliamentary laws have garnered masses of criticism, mainly from the right wing, who find the court overactive and have been calling for its restraint.
I think topics that brought it up to a large extent is that the fact that the court has twice struck down laws that allowed to detain asylum seekers without trial, and the politicians are very much opposed to this and already legislated a third version of the same law. Some were more mitigated, but basically still allowing for detention without trial.
Netanyahu wishes to implement two primary changes. One proposal limits the Supreme Court's ability to strike down laws while allowing the parliament to re-legislate and overturn the court's decision. The other change would add politicians to the committee that appoints the justices, granting the legislator greater power in shaping the court's character. After years of being subjected to a harsh smear campaign from the right wing, the judicial system and its leaders are following the political developments closely. In a special gathering at the president's residence Wednesday, their concern was striking. But they received a significant backing from the president himself, who warned about some of the changes.
There is no law that bypasses the Supreme Court, but a law that bypasses democracy. Hurting human rights is hurting democracy. We have to explain and educate that there is no democracy if the majority seizes the rights of the minority.
We have a strong democracy, but one of the reasons we are appreciated worldwide is our Supreme Court. Parliament is sovereign, but without the separation of powers, we will be hurting our democracy.
In previous governments, there were always those who worked to stop plans to limit the court's authority, and even Prime Minister Netanyahu didn't dare to dramatically change the balance of power. The future finance minister, Moshe Kahlon, has voiced his objections to the reforms, but Netanyahu says he still intends to pass the legislation. The emerging coalition seems determined to declare war.
We're also joined live from Jerusalem by Professor Mordechai Kremnitzer, Vice President of Research at the Israel Democracy Institute. Professor Kremnitzer, it's an honor to have you with us this morning. Good morning. I want to start with asking you what,
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Let's touch on what you perceive as the dangers of what the forming Israeli government, not in place yet, has set her mind on doing with the Supreme Court. What are the dangers of that, in your mind?
The danger is twofold. First of all, if there is a change in the way the judges are nominated, in the direction of politicization of the nomination process, this will harm the confidence that the public has in the court. The court is being considered as an apolitical body. If it becomes a political body, it will lose the trust of the people. So this is a clear harm. And if there is a provision of an override, according to which the Knesset can annul decisions of the court, this will make the activity of the court hollow, and it will prevent the court from performing its role to protect minorities and to protect human rights. So this will take Israeli democracy back at least 25 or 30 years.
Now, Professor Kremnitzer, do stay with us, because the Israeli government, and Tal, this starts with you, and Professor Kremnitzer is part of this discussion with Tal and Bob. The argument of the forming Israeli government is that the will of the people is not represented in that high court, isn't it?
Well, that's one of the arguments. The other argument, I think, which is a bit more problematic and a bit more difficult or complicated to deal with, is that the court has been overruling by democracy and not by the Jewish nature of the state. The feeling amongst the Israeli legislators on the right wing is that the court has legislated two basic laws. Both of them have nothing to do with Israel's Jewish nature. Both of them have to do with Israel's democratic nature. And they feel in many ways that they have to find a way to make the judicial system express the Jewish nature of the country and not just be committed to the the democratic values of the basic laws. That's the first problem. And this is a long ongoing wound inside the Israeli society, and something that has been surfacing again and again since the so-called constitutional revolution in the 90s of the Supreme Court, in which the Supreme Court did exert its power. And I think in many ways this is a reaction to a feeling of an overaction from the right wing, is reacting to a sense of overacting by the Supreme Court. And the thing that lies here at the end, and this came up yesterday at the president's residence too, is the fact that Israel doesn't have a constitution. So this basically creates all the problems. The minute you don't have a constitution, you have too many gaps, too many holes, too many loopholes that both the judiciary system and the parliament and the balance of power, the requested or the wanted balance of power, is too difficult to define without a constitution.
And Yonah Bar of the Jerusalem Post, legal affairs correspondent, speaking of a constitution, I think, what I said to you off camera was that they kept trying to refer to things as on a constitutional level, but Israel doesn't have one. Is that the main problem?
It's the main problem. As you said, we have a so-called constitution, or as Justice Barak said yesterday, a partial constitution that was based on basic laws that came out in the 90s from the Knesset, which the Knesset does need to remember that they actually passed the basic laws. We need a constitution. The problem is there isn't going to be one anytime soon. President Rivlin said it has to do with the fact that the Arab sectors are uncomfortable with defining us as a Jewish and democratic state when they're not Jewish, and the Haredi sector is uncomfortable with defining us as a Jewish state when what they define as Jewish isn't what the majority is. I think it has to do with war and peace issues. I think as long as we're permanently at war, both of those issues get worse, and we have all sorts of national security issues all the time, and we have this vacuum. Look, there are some things where I think even if we had a constitution, let's say, for example, the law about drafting Haredim into the IDF, there's so many complexities there. I think even if we had a constitution, it's healthy sometimes for there to be duking it out between the different branches of government. I think that would be a legitimate one. But there are a lot of accidents. There's a huge vacuum, and when you have that huge vacuum, there's accidents where the Knesset goes over the board, where the Supreme Court goes over the board, and we could avoid that if we had a constitution, or maybe Rivlin had an interesting compromise of saying we're not just going to pass an override law with a high majority of Knesset MKs, not 61, maybe 65, maybe 70, but also a law that formally recognizes that it is the constitutional court, so that people from the Knesset will be able to say, look, if the High Court can strike down our laws, they have that right, and we can override them only in the circumstance if we have that number. It wouldn't be as good as a constitution, but maybe it's a thought to deal with in between.
To deal with in between. Professor Kremnitzer, I want to go back to you for a second, because the initiative of the government that is being formed to try and erode, and I'm looking for the right word, to try and erode the Supreme Court, so to speak, strength or position in Israel's Jewish democracy, and I'm using all the words in it, comes from a fact that many will argue that the people of Israel, and I'm not quoting a few, but critics that are voicing this for many years, many feel that the Supreme Court and the echelon of the people sitting in those benches is of a certain type of person, of a white, left-leaning person, and that needs to be changed. You touched on political appointments, but what would you argue to that? Because that's something that's not just being heard from the forming government.
It is very distanced from reality to say that the court is a group of leftists. I think it has no basis in the facts. I think we have a court, an apolitical court, with judges with different views on activism or pacifism, on the role of the court. And the real issue is whether people see democracy as only majority rule, or they accept that majority includes also protection of human rights and minorities. I think the court has always accepted the definition of the state as a Jewish and democratic state, but it does not see the fact that Israel is a Jewish state as a reason to curtail the democratic nature of the state, while the Israeli extreme right tries to find in the Jewishness of the state a basis for the argument that because of it's a Jewish state, it should be a weak and crippled democracy. And I think this idea should be rejected.
Professor Kremnitzer, thank you for being with us. Tal, I mean, this is, you know, it's something that I'm assuming, and I'm asking you, the forming Israeli government, the factions within it, is not going to give up on.
Well, it seems at the moment, at least from the headlines this morning, yesterday Netanyahu's fourth government is starting to take place. Yesterday, Netanyahu took the first actual steps by signing 2 coalition agreements with the 2 first parties, that is the United Torah Judaism ultra-Orthodox Party and the centrist Kulanu Moshe Kahlon, led by Moshe Kahlon's party. And Moshe Kahlon apparently, reportedly conditioned his joining the government with a veto on these rules.
Right.
So Kahlon might be the last defender, you know, in all of Netanyahu's government, he always had like a moderate fig leaf. Right. So it seems like Kahlon is assuming that role very easily. But Netanyahu has signaled he is going to a narrow right-wing government. And while we won't probably seeing any dramatic change on the international front, in the domestic front, it's clear that Netanyahu wants to make this term a bit more substantial. And this is one of the goals that the Likud has signaled as one of the goals, alongside other goals such as actually canceling all of the anti-ultra-Orthodox reforms that were made in the previous term, and very substantial media reforms. And when you look at both of them, at the media reforms that Netanyahu is proposing and promoting, and at the law, the judiciary reforms, you see that the narrow right-wing government is riding on a trend of undermining liberalism in Israel. It doesn't really have to do maybe with left and right. It has to do more with the liberal component of the right wing that used to be much more prominent when we're talking about former Prime Minister Menachem Begin, and Begin's successors are not so successful.
Not that much.
Not that much, exactly. And the more extreme right took part of the Likud, and this is what some of the backdrop of these changes.
And Yonah Boba, you know, looking at what's going on there at the Supreme Court, is there something that you think that they can do within the Supreme Court to stop this procedure before it begins?
I mean, I think they are already doing it somewhat, and judges will never admit that they change their rulings because of what politicians do. But everybody knows that they do. We started to see this in academic research already a couple decades ago. The first judicial review, the first time that any court in the world basically knocked down something and said it's not constitutional in the United States, Marbury versus Madison, the court basically didn't do what they wanted to do, but said we had the right to do it. And that's the kind of classic thing that courts will do. So if you've looked at some of the rulings that came out in the last month or so, a lot of the rulings take the anti-boycott law that has to do with, now there's a right for basically right-wing groups to sue left-wing NGOs if they take any sort of specific boycotting action. When I was in the High Court, it seemed like the majority was going to go at least 5 to 4, maybe more, striking down large pieces of that. And when you got to the final ruling, when Miriam Naor switched from being the Deputy Justice to the Chief Justice, she was in the 5, kept most of the law. There was a piece of it that was knocked down that made a difference. Right. But I think they're already doing that somewhat. And you'll see that in the upcoming rulings too.
And there is also just to note that there is a observation that some of these threats that are coming now from the government are just a preparation, or actually just a message to the Supreme Court ahead of another anti-infiltration law that is supposed to come up that was already canceled and overridden twice by the Supreme Court, and now the Knesset is going to try to legislate it for the 3rd time. So many perceive these legislations, these initiatives, as a way to transmit a message to the Supreme Court: don't override us again.
Interesting, and I think time will tell, but we will follow it closely. Thank you for joining me in studio. When we get back, we examine the origins of ISIS with investigative journalist Itai Engel. Do stay with us. First, though, let's hear some more of the morning headlines. Good morning, and thank you for staying with us. I-24 News Morning Edition on this April 30th, 2015. And the next story is one that is of great importance, especially if you live in the Middle East. Now, over the course of the last 12 years, Itai Engel, an Israeli journalist who was born in the United States, has traveled in and out of Iraq for a series of documentaries for Israeli television. The material he shot and the people he interviewed over that decade paint a picture and connect dots in a way that has never been seen before, or at least not in latest reports about the region. From the fall of Saddam Hussein in 2003 through Fallujah's bloody sniper years and the rise of the Kurdish fighters against ISIS, he filmed it all on the ground in Iraq and Syria. With the material he has and the connections formed on the ground, Itai Engel has a broader view on the formation of ISIS and how they came to be, one that you may find quite jarring. Now, in spite of international presumption that ISIS, the jihadist Islamist group purporting to take over the Middle East, is not a phenomenon that rose overnight, rather one that started a decade ago and has many in the West to blame. I'm very, very happy to be joined in studio by investigative journalist, filmmaker, and war correspondent Itai Engel. Itai, good morning to you.
Good morning, Gail.
Now, I want us to also to begin with actually taking a look at a bit of footage that you shot almost, this is more than a decade ago, 12 years ago, exactly. It was one of your first trips into Iraq back in 2003. You met a group of people that I think we all know today, but let's begin by taking a look of you in Iraq in 2003 with the former Saddam Hussein soldiers in the streets. Let's have a look.
על פי החלום האמריקני, ממשלה חדשה תקום בבגדד והיא תרסק כל איום דוגמת זה שנשקף ברקע.
We came into a very comprehensive plan how to de-Ba'athify Iraq, banning the Ba'ath party from practicing politics in the future.
What is the thing that you fear the most concerning the Iraqi future?
Well, I'm afraid the most that Ba'athists will get enough support. There are some Arab countries, unfortunately, who are still in favor of returning of Ba'athists to power, and they are encouraging them and they are giving them hope.
כן, הכוונה היא לאנשים האלה שמרגישים כעת מספיק נוח לצאת לרחוב עם דרישות. אנשי מפלגת הבאת' לשעבר, חיילים וקצינים של הצבא העיראקי שבצורה מוזרה סבורים שדווקא הם אחראים לשינוי ההיסטורי.
فاحنا نقول البوش وتوصل لبلير ها مو هم اللي استحلوا العراق بزودهم احنا اللي سقطنا صدام حسين مو بوش ولا بلير الجيش باقي للابد على احنا امريكا الجيش باقي للابد
لابد من امريكا والتحالف وكل العنصريين ان يعطونا حقوقنا كامله ان يعطونا حقوقنا كامله وسنقاتلهم 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 في كل مكان وفي كل بقعه وفي كل ارض العراق وندفع الشهداء والدماء البريه في كل مكان. الجيش باقي للابد.
Hostility against
the American presence in here.
There's no large hostility. There are very sporadic incidents of hostility that is organized by ex-Ba'athists. In fact, the opposite is true.
First of all, you haven't changed a bit. But that said, this is 2003.
Yeah.
Who are these people?
They were the Ba'athists, the ex-soldiers of Saddam Hussein. When I came in for the first time in Iraq, it was 2003. I was very much interested in meeting them because I'm from Tel Aviv. They were the people who were bombing my city. Obviously, they didn't know who I am, but they're very happy that someone was interested in their case. And their case was like that.
Nobody was talking to them at the time. I'm talking from the media. Anybody who came in wasn't speaking
and that's
to
the case.
Yeah.
No one thought they are relevant anymore. When the American came in, you know, the Iraqi invasion, the Americans fought against the soldiers of Saddam Hussein. And then they decided, we'll later on, we'll form a new Iraqi army, but the only group which is excluded from participating and being incorporated into this army would be the Ba'athists, because, you know, it's a very dichotomy way of life of saying, you fought against me, you are a bad guy, you are out. Whether you love him or not, this group is the only group of people who know how to fight, who know how to handle weapons, who know something about tactics, strategy, and everything in Iraq. So once they are excluded, you leave 250,000 people bitter, humiliated, and unemployed, because sometimes, you know, a monthly salary is much more important than any ideology. When I met them, you know, they were so much in shock, as we saw, that they are not participating in the army, and then they started, you know, protesting, and later on intimidating the United States. If we will not be a part of this army, we will burn you, the US soldiers, the new Iraqi army that you are about to set, which will be a Shia government. Unlike us, we are Sunni Ba'athist, ex-soldiers of Saddam, the Sunni leader. And then we will burn not only Iraq, but also, you know, the borders. There won't be any nation states anymore. It sounds you know, so far-fetched, you know. So when the Americans were listening to them, like, who are they? They're not relevant anymore. They're like Saddam's statue, you know. They have been, you know, sort of intimidation, but they belong to the garbage of history. This is what they say.
And I think it's a fascinating point, and one that you know, the world doesn't listen to enough, that, you know, when it is a Western mentality to think, as you just said, when the Americans came in, they figured, okay, it's done. We just took out the Baathists from power, so we're moving along. But these people didn't go anywhere. They were on the ground. They were upset. You had a chance,
and they became the military backbone of ISIS later on.
Exactly, exactly that. But as you mentioned just now, and moving this along to the Iraqi army, because today, when we look at the spread of ISIS in the Middle East, and we look at how hard it is to fight them, and that the Iraqi army in Iraq itself, or whatever is left of Iraq, is not making gains against them. You were there in Iraq also in 2005, when the Americans were training this Iraqi army that is supposed to take on ISIS today. And let's take a look at what you perceived were the problems in that formation of the army. We have a bit that you shot as well. Let's have a look.
Put your 50 there, motherfucker! Put your fucking 50 there!
תכף נחזור להתרחשות כאן. רק לפני כן, מחשבה על מה שצפוי לעיראק במוקדם או במאוחר. החיילים האלה, מתישהו, יצאו מפה. העניין הוא שיציאה מסודרת של הכוחות האמריקנים מעיראק תלויה בכך שאת החלל שיותירו אחריהם ימלא צבא עיראקי מסודר. והאמריקאים עצמם מסייעים לבנות את הצבא הזה כרגע.
To make it condition 3, all you have to do is simply open the cover.
בכיתה הזו, שממוקמת 100 קילומטר ממערב לבגדד, מלמדים חיילי המרינס האמריקאים את חיילי הצבא העיראקי החדש איך להילחם.
Okay. Now we're ready to fire on the enemy.
ואנחנו ג'אהזים לרמי על העדו. אלא שהבעיה מתחילה כבר עם ההגדרה הזו. מה זה בעצם צבא עיראקי? הרי עיראק זה שיעים, סונים וכורדים שתמיד רק נלחמו האחד בשני. הנה, בקבוצה הזו לדוגמה, החיילים האלה הם שיעים, והמתורגמן העיראקי שמסביר להם איך לראות הוא כורדי.
So now your friend's going to shoot.
Yeah, my friends, we are going to train them how to shoot PKC.
Are you happy to see them shooting?
So, yeah.
It's a problem, huh?
Well, I'm afraid that one day they will use it against my people.
We're going to pair you up in gun teams, and you're going to file by and get your ammunition.
I do it as a part of my job, but I don't like to teach those because they like you as long as you are not against them or do not mention your rights. Or, for example, if I mention I'm Kurdish, I would like my Kurdistan to get independent, my people. I don't think they like that stuff.
Tito, name Tito?
Itai.
Itai?
Itai.
Itai, good.
ليس أنا يهودي مشاكل؟
والله احنا كمسلمين بصراحة يعني ما نحب اليهود، يعني أقول لك إياها، أنا حكي لك من قلبي يعني.
אוקיי, לא לקחתי את זה אישית, לא ציפיתי ששיעי יתאהב בי רק משום שאני יהודי, אבל מה באשר ליחסם כלפי ארצות הברית? הרי רק בזכות האמריקאים, השיעים האלה יהפכו כעת להיות הכוח הדומיננטי בצבא העיראקי. מה שלא היה תחת המשטר הסוני של סדאם חוסיין. לכאורה, הם אמורים להיות אסירי תודה.
אמריקה בעיראק, جيد مش جيد.
لا مو جيد. مو جيد. جاي تقتل أطفال، تقتل نساء وتقتل شيوخ. وما جاي أصلاً ما جاي هي قوة تحالف مثل ما يطلقون عليها بالصحافة. هم جاي قوة احتلال.
Real quickly, I think it's always worth to mention that when you go into these places, at the end of the day, I'm just touching on the fact that you are also Israeli, and it's incredibly, incredibly dangerous, not to boost your ego, but, you know, it's a frightening thing. Though, let's touch on this army, okay? The one that is supposed to fight them. Yeah. You're there. This is the essence and the problem of Iraq, isn't it?
Exactly.
It's the factions.
It's the new Iraqi army that the Americans were forming. Again, they were excluding the only part that could use weapons and know how to fight. These were the Baathists, and they came to ISIS. The new Iraqi army is a melange, you know, of what is left of a bit of Sunnis, mainly Shia and Kurds. The thing is, as you saw, it doesn't exist anymore. Iraq doesn't exist anymore. Iraq was invention to begin with, so the old formation, you know, was maintained through, you know, the terror methods of Saddam Hussein. Yeah. When he is out, you know, the big secret of Iraq is being revealed. You have no Iraqis in Iraq. Everybody called themselves, I'm a Shia, I'm a Sunni, I'm a Kurd. So you cannot maintain like a formation of Iraqi army because everybody trying to run away to his own faction. The Americans were warned about this problem, but they said something like, we know, and probably we know better, we ourselves American, we're sort of a melting pot. We came from a very different parts in the world, so we know it can work, so it will work also in Iraq. And therefore, you know, they were insisting of putting everybody together. And this is, you know, when you form an army, and we know as Israelis, you know, when you have a fight, unfortunately, you know, you will die from the next for the person, you know, in the same platoon. But when you form like a platoon or a company consists of a Shia, Sunni, of Kurds, no one of them will trust the other one. In order to fight ISIS, after you watch video clips, you know, of beheading and torching, burning people alive, you need to have a resolve, you need to have a sense of identity, and you do not have it, because why me as a Shia would fight alongside a Sunni? We have such a different aims.
And also, but, you know, and raised in a region where those animosities, you know, I hate to say it that way, but the hate between the factions, but the sectarian, you know, divide is so deep. We're going to be joined over the phone now from London by former British ambassador to Syria, because this leads us also to the next place that you visited. Former British ambassador to Syria, former senior UNRWA official, Ambassador Peter Ford. Peter, good morning to you.
Good morning.
I don't know if you had a chance to listen to journalist and filmmaker Itai Engel here in the studio, but this is a man who traveled Iraq for the course of the last decade, and he chimes in on something that I think you may relate to, the fact that there's a misunderstanding from the West of the region, and that what we're seeing that happening in Iraq now is something that actually, you know, can relate also to Syria. Would you agree that ISIS is almost an invention of the West? Not an invention, but they helped create it?
Totally agree, and what was said was absolutely on the ball. The West was unwittingly complicit in the generation and propagation of ISIS. For one thing, remember I was based in Syria. For one thing, the West scared the living daylights out of the Syrian regime during the Iraq war, because it was being rumored that Syria was next on the list. So naturally, the Syrians retaliated in the only way they could by permitting the flow of jihadis into Iraq across their border. I often had to go around to the Syrian Foreign Ministry to remonstrate about this, but it was hopeless. They were defending themselves. Of course, this then boomeranged against the West and later against the Syrian regime itself. But yeah, we were instrumental in creating ISIS.
Yeah, and as you wrote also, former Ambassador Ford, as you wrote in your column several weeks ago, but definitely, Itai, you know, when we look at what's going on in Syria and Iraq right now, they do not exist anymore, do they? I mean, it's countries that don't exist, Syria and Iraq, because Syria is the place that you were at last as well.
No, it is broken to dozens of pieces. I mean, when you stand in one place, you know, 1 mile, you know, ahead, you know, it would be a
And I want to touch with you really quickly in the 2 minutes that we have, in the time that we have left. You keep going back into that region. Very short. It's going to be in a short while next week. It's World Press Day. Okay, yeah, and it's World Press Day, and it's so important to cover these places on the ground. It's incredibly dangerous, though. Yeah. Why is it important to see these places from the ground, though?
Because only when you are on the ground and you're talking to these people, you understand what's going on. I mean, when you try to analyze things from afar, I mean, you're not on the ground, you know, you're based on what you know and what we learned and everything we learned. Not only journalists, you know, even people in the academy, even people in the Israeli intelligence. You know, we were basing our knowledge upon regimes and people and key figures that we knew their habits, their character, and how to monitor them. When everything is collapsing, people are coming from the bottom, and these are people that you cannot predict anymore. And you have to go to the field because you have no information about them. People tend, you know, more and more, definitely in journalism, to be more commentators, speaking about places they've never been to, and explaining people, interpret people they never met. Once you go there, even, you know, 1 week, you will be there and you understand completely different the whole situation.
And the story, and I think that says it all. Itai Engel also lectures on occasion throughout Israel, sometimes also throughout the world. Very important work that you do. I want to very much thank you for being with us this morning.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And obviously, we'd love to talk to you in the future as well. That said, all the time that we have, when we get back, something completely different, sports that I know nothing about. So do stay with us. First, the news. Good morning, I-24 News Morning Edition on this April 30th, 2015. And the show's been going on for nearly 2 hours, so now we know the year.
That's right.
I said 2014 about half an hour ago.
Oh, no.
So, joined in the studio by Ami Kaufman and Mirav Savir for the best part of this show. Really, because it's Thursday and it's nearly ending. Ami, the spiral viral that is the web review, what's going on?
Okay, well, I'm going to try not to scare you with this first one. Don't be too alarmed. But there is an unmanned spaceship falling towards Earth as we speak. It is a Russian spacecraft, a cargo ship.
Okay.
It's 3 tons, and the Russian space agency has lost total control over this thing, and it's now on its way to Earth.
Clearly, we're not seeing a picture of it, sadly, but it's on its way to Earth. Well,
yeah,
I can look behind here. I'm waiting for it to like come in.
Not yet.
Not yet. Not
Coast
yet.
is clear.
Okay, there we go. What? We're plunging towards Earth after agencies lose control.
Now apparently it's going to. Apparently it's going to. It's gonna burn up when it hits the atmosphere.
Wow! Is somebody in it?
It's unmanned.
Thank God.
It will burn up when it hits the atmosphere again, hopefully, and there might be some debris, but hopefully not too much. But the worst part is that the people on the space station have no, their goods, their food, their whatever they needed, their equipment is not there, and they have another ship that is supposed to arrive, hopefully, on time in June.
In June?
Yes. But they have to wait longer now.
Yeah, I was wondering what are they doing in the meantime. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, exciting weekend.
Yeah.
So basically, we're like people on Earth, beware. This weekend, you may be hit by a ball of fire dropping from the sky. At least you'll know what it was.
Yeah.
Okay.
Heads up.
Heads up.
Jerusalem Post has a story. This is a video that is going viral all over the world. Actually, it happened in Israel. Here in Jerusalem, a woman asked for a cigarette from a person in the gas station, and look what happens.
Okay,
this is a pretty amazing thing.
Let's take a look at the video. Okay, well, great. No audio, but we are looking at. Please, can I have a light?
Right.
Do not smoke in gas stations is something that don't try this at home. Okay. Whoa! Whoa! Yay! Sorry. Nice. My officer was not impressed.
No, you know what it reminds me of?
What?
Back in the day with Zoolander and the whole scene where they were playing with the fire. Just in time for Zoolander 2.
That's true. No, Zoolander had a great scene where they're all like, they're doing like this commercial as if they're like sipping and then eating.
With water and poses. And
Mirav and I have the same deep cultural taste.
Really? Well, I'm glad.
I'm excited for the second one. I don't know about you.
If we get through this segment, there is a Zoolander item specifically tailored for you. But this woman, she asked for a lighter from this guy. He didn't give it to her, and she decided to light up the car with his brother in the back seat.
Okay.
He ran out. He's safe. Everybody's safe. She was arrested. And she denied involvement, even though it's filmed.
Ouch! Yeah, not a laughing matter.
Right.
Yeah, not a laughing
moving
matter.
on.
Yes.
To an item that we have from the Guardian. The Iranians are asking their supreme leader, "How is it that you have such long videos on Instagram?" Because everybody on Instagram, when you put a video on Instagram, you only have 15 seconds, except for one person, and this man is the supreme leader of Iran, who for some reason can put videos that are way, way longer of his speeches that he talks about, his Iranian nukes and stuff like that. So Instagram told the Guardian, yes, this is a glitch, and we're fixing it.
That was not on purpose. Okay, and I'm assuming Benjamin Netanyahu somewhere in Jerusalem is going, aha, I told you.
They're conspiring against us with Instagram.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay. Our next item, I've heard for years already that bar mitzvahs in the States are just going totally out of control. They're like themed.
I have something to say, Mirav. This is all in humor, but you would know because that was last year.
So,
we're about 12 years
12 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay, look at 40 here. Yeah.
This lucky young man has, he topped everybody. He brought Nicki Minaj to his bar mitzvah.
Okay, that's ridiculous. It's becoming like American
This is Nicki Minaj.
weddings.
You can see this picture with all his friends of the bar mitzvah, the bar mitzvah
That
friends.
is ridiculous.
And she sang 7 songs for this
Oh,
kid,
nice.
who is the son of Andrew Merstein, one of the New York's richest men. The
We have a
taxi
clip
cab.
of this,
I think
apparently.
we might have something there.
Let's take a look.
Education, stay in school, and don't be a slouch or a bum. And ladies, never let a man have to take care of you. Do you understand me? Be your own woman, be your own person. Do you understand me?
There are 2 things that I really love about this, is that at a bar mitzvah, when you're coming into manhood, she's giving a speech, about female empowerment to the little young girls, which is really nice. And another thing, which is great, it's everybody knows that this happens when you're 13, and she asks him on stage, so how old are you?
Yeah,
So,
yeah, grand.
Right.
But the thing to me, I'm sorry, I have to say this and use the awful phrase of as a mother. One of the reasons, the frightening thing about New York, because I heard another story about a bar mitzvah of, I think it's one of the Rockefellers or who knows what, whoever, the descendants in New York, that they rented or they locked down the entire Museum of Natural History in New York.
Wow, that's amazing.
And
That's
you
what money
can't,
does.
well, it's a bar mitzvah for love of, go ahead.
This next one's from a great site called Bored Panda, and the selfie stick craze is going just berserk. But these guys have invented a new craze, selfie stick, and I think it shows, it's a hand, just so you don't feel like you're alone.
Okay. It's a selfie stick that looks like a hand.
It looks like a hand, and you can just take pictures with it as if you're...
Because if you're a narcissist, it's okay.
Yeah.
Oh my God, no, that's ridiculous.
That's a little scary.
That's creepy.
That's a little scary.
It's really, it's a hand because even though you're okay.
Yeah.
Clearly, I have nothing to say.
I think you'll like this one.
That's awful.
That's pretty awful. But this next one is coming from India, and it's an animal video because I know you like this.
I love animal videos.
And what happens when an Indian village sees a young elephant in distress, sunk in a hole? Let's watch
Okay, let's take a look.
They got him out. They got him out.
Don't be sarcastic.
My lips are sealed.
And just one quickly, because you guys love Zoolander.
Yes.
The Daily Mail, apparently, they're kind of leaking stuff about who's going to be in the Zoolander 2. And Ben Stiller put this photo on Instagram showing him and Justin Bieber giving each other what is called the blue steel look. So Justin Bieber is going to be in the film.
He's probably going to have some sort of a cameo because the first one, and Mirav and I know this as avid fans, had so many cameos.
Everyone was in it.
Yeah, everybody was in it.
I don't know if I want Justin Bieber in it.
But
Unless he's making
they'll
fun of
probably
Justin
do.
Bieber.
Yeah, they'll probably have like not a dance off, but
I
a
hope
beat
so.
off or something like that.
Right.
Brilliance! Listen, this was the most important news of the day.
I'm very happy. I'm very happy.
No,
Make
thank
happy.
you. Locked in studio for sports, Mirav. Yes. Take it away.
Starting off with a little bit of hard news from overnight. Kevin Love, Cavaliers player who was injured, he had a shoulder injury on Monday night in the last game against the Celtics. He had shoulder surgery. He's out for 4 to 6 months. So that's it. He's done for these playoffs. A lot of the conversation was, will he be back? They were saying at least not until past the next round. And now the question, how did the Cavaliers survive the rest of the playoffs without him? He is an integral part of the team. Absolutely. There's a lot of talk about how is he doing compared to other players and the relationships between them and how it's not going as well as planned when he first joined the team. Now we'll see how it's going to pan out.
Yes.
And now to the bigger stories of the week. The fight that everybody's been waiting for months. Manny versus Floyd. The boxing matchup that has been called possibly the best matchup in 100 years, and this is including the Rumble in the Jungle between Muhammad Ali and George Foreman. Right. So some people are saying that this is going to be better than that matchup back in the 1970s. Wow. They had their final news conference yesterday. Here's some of what they had to say during that news conference.
Let's hear.
Everything that I have accomplished is God who gave me the strength. I just want to be an example and inspiration to everybody how my life before I became a boxer. I used to sleep in the street, starving, hungry. And now I cannot imagine that the Lord raised me in this position.
That's what both competitors bring to the table, excitement. The biggest fight in boxing history, and I'm a part of it, so that's a great thing, you know. I'm just truly, truly blessed to be where I'm at. I feel good, I feel strong, and I see you guys Saturday. Thank you.
I've got the director in my ear going crazy about the amount of money involved in this fight.
Millions and millions upon millions of dollars. I mean, according to Forbes, Floyd Mayweather has earned over $400 million in his 19-year career. He's expected to make around $180 million just on these. It doesn't matter if he wins, loses. He's going to pass Tiger Woods with his amount of earnings. Pacquiao's not going to be making as much as him. But his nickname is Floyd Money Mayweather.
Yeah. Yeah, that says it all.
It says it all. Now, yeah, he's 47-0, 26 knockouts in his career. He's never lost. 47-0.
Stop. How old is he?
He's in his late 30s.
Okay,
and then he's 38. Manny Pacquiao's 36. He's 57-5-2 with 38 knockouts in his career. It is going to be an insane fight. There are so many people weighing in on who's going to win this fight. Mike Tyson has Pacquiao winning this. And a lot of Mayweather's legacy may rely on this fight. He's 47-0. Wow. It's taken years to convince him to take part in this fight. It was Pacquiao who was pushing for it. Mayweather was saying no, no. I believe they announced it back in January. The world's been going insane. Tickets went on sale. They were sold out within a matter of seconds. Now they only are sold about 500.
It's great. No, it's a Hollywood film in the making.
Especially since you have Pacquiao growing up in poverty in the Philippines.
Are these lightweights, by the way? They're not heavy.
They're 147 both.
Yeah. They're not the heavyweights like
no,
Ali
they're definitely they're both 5'8" and 5'6".
Yeah. But they can dance.
But it is going to be an incredible matchup, and you know they're saying this is going to rely on it. There's going to be 16,500 people there. Only about 500 to 1,000 are sold to the fans. The rest are going to the promoters and the tickets. And the tickets that went to fans are between $1,500 to $7,500. And within minutes, they were on StubHub for about $100,000 for people who wanted to be on there. It is.
I don't think we're going, Ami.
Wow.
Yeah, but that's going to be televised.
It's going to be Buffalo Wild Wings. I heard is going to charge admittance to watching it, like for people to watch it there, because it's only going to be on pay-per-view. So even in the States, you have to pay to watch it at home, and not everybody has pay-per-view, and so everybody's going to be looking for ways to find it illegally from the MGM Grand in Las Vegas.
Yes.
And from 16,000 people in the crowd to no people in the crowd. The Baltimore Orioles played a game against the Chicago White Sox yesterday with absolutely zero fans in the stadium.
Wow.
This is because of the riots in Baltimore. Yeah. They canceled Monday night's game 40 minutes before first pitch, and they canceled Tuesday night's game at around at 11 o'clock in the morning, I believe. On Monday, they had to escort the White Sox players to their hotel rooms, afraid something may happen. The riots were just 2 miles away from Camden Yards.
And Ray Lewis.
Ray Lewis, former Baltimore Ravens player, he had a little message. We see a lot of athletes coming out. We remember the T-shirts "I Can't Breathe" coming out on this topic. Well, he had a message to Baltimore people of Baltimore.
Baltimore, get off the streets. Kids, go home. Stay home. You don't have no right to do what you're doing to this city. Too many hardworking people build this city. We put this city together. We put this city on our back. We with you. We know what's going on. We know the problems. We know there was wrong done. We know we're not getting the right justice. We know all these answers. But riding in our streets is wrong. It's dead wrong.
Between him and the mother pulling the kid off the street, I think they should run the city.
Definitely a different message than you've heard from the other athletes. I mean, others was like silent protest with the T-shirts. He's coming out saying, "What are you doing?" And we saw this. It's being, Chicago, New York have followed suit. Now, in the matter of, for baseball itself, the league's been around for over 100 years. This is the first time fans were not admitted into a game. They do not remember this happening. I mean, there could have been no fans because they just didn't want to come, but it's never been to the point where they weren't weren't allowed in. And the players were describing, and at first they were having fun with it on Twitter yesterday before the game. They were joking around, saying, a Chicago player was saying, guys, we're going to try and get the crowd behind us early in this one. But then when you talk to them after, a lot of them were using the word eerie. You know, the Orioles ended up winning 8-2. They had a huge first inning, and you watch highlights of it, and you're saying,
watching.
A double to left field, 2 runs scored, and you go to the crowd, and
nothing.
Silence.
Wow.
And it's definitely
speaks volumes.
Absolutely. And they were supposed to have another a series at home this weekend. It was moved to Tampa Bay. It's going to be considered a home game, but played in St. Petersburg in Florida. And they're going to be, I mean, a lot of talks about how much money they're going to be losing out on this. But forget about the money. Look at the home field advantage. It's a home game in front of Tampa Bay's crowd. How much support are you going to have? In my opinion, thank God, and we don't want this to happen, but it happened now, not in September.
Not in September. Merav, fascinating. Ami understands a lot more than me because I kept hearing you like, wow. But thank you for that. That was all the time that we had, folks. Do not forget to check us out on all those social networks, Facebook, Twitter, whatnot, and tomorrow morning, tune in another edition of the Morning Edition, the place you should be just because you should. Now, the news. Thank you.